Well, the original inspiration or the germ of the idea for Join, which was originally called CloudBus, came from or followed a number of conversations that we had with major enterprise customers, primarily in financial services, State Street Bank, AbbVie, which is obviously not, it's in pharmaceuticals, and a number of hedge funds. And they said to us, we've seen this evolution of applications evolving to where they're delivered as a service. Salesforce is a great example. Amazon Web Services was the first about 15, 20 years ago to deliver compute as a service. About a half decade later, 6, 7 years later, they offered storage as a service. But still, there was no migration there was no innovation with regard to enterprise networking other than, let's say, in the data center. And even the data center was still very much a box-based purchase. And so the idea was we sat down with, well, what we did is we sat down with a number of these customers and said, how do you want this to evolve? And they said, well, look, today we have to go procure a circuit or two from telcos or cable operators or fiber providers. We've got to go buy routers. We've got to get the router from the telco maybe. We buy our own router. We have to buy firewalls. We have to buy switches. We have to buy access points, load balancers, in some cases, WAN optimization products, and so forth and so on, apply all these appliances. And then we have to make them all work together. And the problem is it's really hard, especially as our IT organizations are shrinking, and they're shrinking quickly. And so what they said was, we're really looking for a company that can deliver an enterprise network for a campus or a branch, just as Amazon, let's say, had delivered compute as a service, as a cloud service. And so we really see ourselves as one of the first, if not the first, to really take on the challenge of cloudifying the LAN. Well, when the company started, our real intention was to sell to enterprises. And so we had our first anchor enterprise clients. I've already mentioned some of the names. They deployed us. Initially, we were really just focusing on branch offices. So the idea was these big companies had branch offices, maybe 50, maybe a couple hundred employees. And what we were doing was deploying in those offices our network as a service. And the network as a service was not merely the network was not merely a wireless. There was also legacy Ethernet requirements in many cases, in particular in financial institutions. They still had a lot of desktop computers with Ethernet connectivity, so wired connectivity. But along the way, what we learned is that in order to provide that end-to-end solution, incorporating the ISP, we had to get very friendly with the landlords, because the landlord or the owner of the building would require us to navigate their riser. In some cases, we actually had to rip up a floor in order to pull fiber into a building. Again, this is a one-off. It was early on. And that really led to discussions with the owners of commercial office buildings. And so in late February of 2018, we actually met with Boston Properties, which is the largest commercial office REIT in the United States. And what we realized is that there was a whole other way of thinking about delivering a network as a service. What if the purveyor of the office also wants to bundle in the technology, perhaps other elements, to make the office procurement process much more seamless, much more frictionless for enterprises? And so our first project really was with Boston Properties, and we sat down as they were developing a brand new brand called Flex by BXP that provided a very, very high-end single-tenant experience for offices, for sophisticated enterprise clients. And Join, by that time, we were still CloudBus, but we were beginning to use the brand Join. And what we had was we really created the technology platform, everything from the wired and wireless connectivity. We collaborated with the collaboration tool vendors. This is in the pre-Zoom room era, and provided that turnkey solution to our partner, in this case, Boston Properties, and then provided that very sophisticated network experience for the end customer, for the enterprise that was then occupying those offices. And what we discovered along the way is that then all of a sudden other opportunities emerged from that. And we'll touch on it a little bit later, I think, when we talk about our foray into analytics. But we also learned that there were other values to controlling that network and the security of that network in an office, because we started to introduce sensors and other technology that allowed us to track the activity and environmental quality and so forth in the offices that we served. And so while we didn't expect to end up partnering with owners of office buildings and later owners of retail buildings, what we realized is there was this consistent theme that the network in a fully connected world, in a world where the cloud is really where a lot of the applications, a lot of the data reside, the role of the network is essential to success. And that we were finding more and more use cases beyond just conventionally connecting a phone or connecting a computer or a tablet to the internet. And so that initial discovery very early on in our journey as a company set us on a very interesting course that has endured to this day. Well, our engagement with the owners of commercial office actually began pretty early in the company's history, in the company's life. We were originally introduced to Vornado and Tishman Speyer, and then later to Boston Properties. And what we quickly learned with Boston Properties is that they had this very, very compelling vision for how they saw the evolution of the office. And then what they saw was they were going to build a brand that was all about a very, very high quality, flexible office that high quality enterprises or very sophisticated enterprises could go consume. But along the way, we also started to interact with other owners of office assets that had very different non-office specific requirements, because what we realized is that the role of a network in a cloud connected world is essential. And so in most cases, these companies were using dozens or more scores of ISP connections to connect discrete systems in their buildings to the internet. In most cases with no cybersecurity, no firewall protection, no endpoint protection, nothing to actually protect those devices. And so we happened upon, probably not really until late 2020, so we were now into the pandemic a little bit, that many of these customers we're working with needed the network. And because they did not have IT organizations, it was only natural that a company that could deliver it as a service was the logical vendor to work with for them. And so instead of connecting people and their computers and phones and tablets and whatnot, what we were connecting now was mission critical infrastructure, building management systems, HVAC control systems, parking control systems, surveillance systems, IoT sensors that were monitoring motion, cameras for, as I said, for surveillance, access control systems to let people in the door, elevator control systems, because you definitely don't want somebody to take over the elevator. And so this really created a whole new use case for us that was really well suited to what Join did, which was we provided a very, very robust, high performance, highly resilient network. We delivered it as a service, and we allowed that, given our early embrace of zero trust security, it allowed us also to provide layers of security to these mission critical systems and devices that had previously been missing. And so the value proposition to our customers was that we could reduce their operating costs and make their buildings much more technology and data forward. Well, there've actually been a lot of surprises along the way with the business, things that we did not, events that we simply didn't anticipate. Obviously, the biggest one was that fairly early on in our life, in early 2020, we were hit with the pandemic, and of course, the pandemic had a very significant impact on on our business. And what we realized is that, of course, as a long ago colleague of mine said, you have to adapt, evolve in order to survive. Adapt and evolve in order to survive. And so, consequently, we had to go through that early on in the pandemic. And so, if you look at what we did with our network, we realized that there were a number of other values that we could bring to our clients. In particular, we could begin to help them understand during the pandemic, during the early days, how people were using how people were using the building. We developed an early application to allow our office owner clients to schedule elevator rides so that they were not packed. And we did a number of things where we realized the power of the data that we'd been collecting, but not really using, held much more promise than what we really understood. And so that early sort of mid 2020 timeframe inspired us to start thinking about, or intrigued us enough to look more deeply into how we could leverage the huge data sets we were collecting on the buildings that we were in and the offices we were in, not to go sell it to the public, but how could we make it benefit our clients? And so that really accelerated our journey in the second half of 2020 into today, to build what we think are some of the most forward-looking, some of the most compelling real-time views of what's going on in a building. So I think that certainly one of the things that we realized was that our presence in the building could actually be used for far more than what we had initially intended, and that really was what has given rise to all sorts of new use cases that we continue to develop and bring to the market today. From the early days, we knew that in order to build a scalable company that can operate globally, can be profitable, which is very important if you want to encourage investors to get involved with your company, we needed to use data to make our operations as efficient as possible. So from the very, very early days, we were using real-time data collection to keep us informed about issues, anomalies, whatever glitches, things that were going on in our customer sites. This is really going back to the very earliest days. As time went on, what we realized is that the more data we were collecting, it actually provided us with predictive information about how we could improve services to customers. One thing that many people forget is that while WebEx predated, or even Zoom predated the pandemic, and people working remotely and frankly, people sitting in offices like I am talking to a camera, really changed the nature of the most significant applications operating on networks. And so the Zooms and Teams and Meets and WebExes and so forth really became the most significant consumers of bandwidth. Frankly, they were also typically quite latency sensitive. And there were a number of other elements associated. And because they were telecommunications services, there was an end-to-end element. And so in the case the join was really guaranteeing an end-to-end experience, we were learning how to optimize to support collaboration tools like Teams or Join or Zoom or others. Consequently, analytics has become more and more at the center, or the data, because really analytics is part of the big data set that we're collecting, is that the data are really driving our understanding of the changing behaviors of our customers, of the devices, in the case that there are mission critical systems there. As we start looking at unusual behaviors, data really provides us with much deeper insights into how our network is being utilized, how our customers are being utilized, and then we can anticipate how we can improve that experience for them. The emergence of AI, and AI is not new. I was an undergraduate over 40 years ago writing Lisp and Scheme routines, which was not all that special back then. We didn't have very powerful computers. But if you fast forward to 2021, 2022, with the arrival of ChatGPT and whatnot, there became all sorts of new opportunities for us to leverage AI, both as an interface to assist our operations teams, so that we could streamline support requests from customers. Our notion of a network operations center is not people sitting in front of a screen. It's really an AI-driven network operations experience, so that you can get the highest quality responses to customers. And so data was the foundation. Analytics was sort of the next build on top of that, where we were starting to gain understanding or insight into what was happening. AI has really been the key driver in allowing us to provide a much, much higher quality experience to our customers. And ultimately, we think that there are many, many new opportunities for artificial intelligence that are, or I should say, intelligent systems that will help us continue to improve our services and continue to anticipate the new and emerging needs of our customers. During the pandemic, we were, as we were looking at ways of growing the business, we met Obayashi Corporation through one of our investors, Building Ventures. And Obayashi is one of the top 10 construction companies in the world. It is the largest construction company in Japan. It also happens to be a large owner of commercial real estate. It's an investor in commercial real estate. It has far-flung interests. It's interested in technology. And very clearly, the team that we were interacting with, all based in Silicon Valley, was very much focused on how can a company like Obayashi, which is really better known for concrete concrete and steel and hard hats, how can they leverage technology to improve the buildings that they are constructing for their clients? And so that began what is now about a 3.5-year relationship between Join and Obayashi. We've formed a common venture about a year ago. We went live. And Obayashi's vision really sits at the intersection of both smart building technology, so thinking about leveraging Join's network delivered as a service, or its cloud network, in a building as a way to simplify or streamline operations, so that you have fewer errors, fewer outages, fewer issues in buildings, but also as a means of facilitating communications for visitors or workers in a particular building. And that sort of was at the basis of what they were doing. Obayashi has actually a much bigger vision about wellness in the workplace and a number of other factors that they continue to evolve. And we are supporting at a certain level today, and we hope to support more over time. About a year ago, Obayashi formed a new venture called Uprising. And just very recently, we're not announcing any of the details, but working together between Uprising and Join, Uprising being the Obayashi subsidiary, what we believe is the largest enterprise campus network as a service serving about 4,000 employees went live just this past week. It is a very, very large scale, project. It's was purchased by a global 250 company, and we believe that it is actually an expression of the bigger vision that Join has, which is that while we started off focusing on the branch, the reality is the particular use case that we support or the applications that we support can scale to much greater heights into major companies and to support their core operations. And so we've been very happy. We continue to see excitement and opportunity in our collaboration with Obayashi. We expect that within Japan, which is obviously the third or fourth largest economy in the world and has an enormous amount of opportunity, we do expect to see a very robust business growing with Obayashi over the next several years. And we also are very appreciative of the fact that the Obayashi and the Uprising teams continue to challenge us with new technical opportunities for us to differentiate ourselves technically. And those are actually very, those are great for Join because that continues to allow us to differentiate ourselves and our technology assets. The future for Join, not just for Join, but I think for other new entrants in the cloudified LAN or the network as a service, is actually very bright. We're looking at a market that today, based on what other vendors, and I'll pick on Cisco as a company that is the leader and is talking about this. This is a roughly $160 billion a year market. It's a lot of spending. This is a key area for just about, actually probably every company in the world of note. Is that as more and more companies become cloud first or cloud only, the role of the network becomes even more essential to their day-to-day operations. And so for us, we believe that the adoption of these technologies are only normal. That's what we expect. That is the evolution. We saw this almost 20 years ago in compute with Amazon Web Services. We've seen it obviously with other cloud services that have emerged, Azure, Google Cloud. And we believe that this is really the beginning of a trend that will take on a significant piece of the market. Second of all, we think that there's going to be much more of what we think of as of outcome-based solutions rather than point solutions talking about networking. Ultimately, the network is there, but the network is really there as part of the workplace. And so Join early on, or relatively early on, got involved in combining other elements of the workplace, collaborating with other vendors to provide that more complete solution, or provide a programmable platform that would allow partners like Zoom and Microsoft and others to have a higher performance a workplace network that was going to provide, again, a better experience for collaboration tools or for file sharing, or it might be for anything else. And so we believe that there is a significant amount of opportunity just in pulling together and better integrating the tools to create a better experience. Right now, it can still be very challenging for the average user to connect to a particular AV room and be able to share slides or get on a conference call or something. And we as technologists need to devote our energies to making that much, much simpler. So I think that is still something that we're driving hard to enable with our partners. The second thing is that there is more and more opportunity in the analytics or the digital domain to leverage the data that we collect to provide better insights for our building owner clients, for our enterprise clients, so they can make better decisions, better informed decisions, well-informed decisions about how do they make multi-million-dollar, multi-hundred-million-dollar investments in real estate as they go to make decisions about how to configure offices, how do they optimize so that the productivity of their employees and their teams is at its peak. And so we think that those are really some of the areas that are on the horizon. They're on the near horizon. We are already getting those requests today, and we think that that's really very key to where the direction of the company is. I mean, for 35, 40, 50 years, whatever it's been, companies have been consuming and building their own networks. And the way they've been building their networks is they buy products, and they buy lots of products. They buy switches, they buy routers, they buy firewalls, they buy WAN optimizers, they buy you name it. There's just many, many different tools that or appliances that they buy or products that they buy, and then they assemble it together, make it all work. They've got to do their network. They've got to create network management. They want to manage network events, anomalous events, and so they want to trap those events and see if they can then work backwards if there's an error in the future to figure out what's going on. I think the difference is that number one, the network as a service is really about delivering all of that as a service. I mean, as I pointed out, I gave a talk recently and said that when the genius of what Salesforce.com did 25 years ago now, 26 years ago, is that what many people forget, mostly because they're not old and over the hill like me, is that in the old days, when we built an application, when we went on to build an ERP application, we went out and made a decision. Do we buy a DEC VAX or a microvax, or do we buy an HP 3000, or do we go upscale and buy IBM AS400, or maybe even a mainframe? Probably not, but maybe. Or do we do something sort of modern, like buy a Sun Microsystem or the Sun servers? Or for me, since I was a Silicon Graphics, I'd of course love for you to have bought our Sun Challenge servers, from the early and mid '90s. And then you figured out what your operating system was and your file system. And then you went to Oracle and you bought a database, or you licensed a database. You went to Ingress, or you went to somebody else that had a database, and you bought the database. And then you went out and you bought the tools. And then you had to go out and buy storage, because when you got the store, when you collected all this data, you had to store it somewhere. And then somebody in the IT organization had to glue all that stuff together. And then somebody else actually wrote the application. And the genius of Benioff was that he said, no, you don't need to do all that. We'll do all that, and we'll provide you with a reasonably flexibly customizable application on top. And then we're going to guarantee that you get access to that application. So you put your data in, we'll keep it safe. Obviously, everybody worried about that in the early days. How am I going to know that my competitor doesn't get access to my lead data or my customer data? And ultimately, what happened was that simplification of the application was essential. A lot of people have forgotten that's how hard it was to develop applications back when I was relatively young. And the same thing was true with computing, right? You had to go out and buy servers and provision the servers, set them up, and so forth and so on. And maybe you needed them, maybe you didn't. Maybe maybe the utilization was relatively small. So with what we're doing, we've taken that same approach. We're not trying to solve every problem, right? There are lots of different networking problems. We really focused on a very, very specific problem, which is how do we provide high quality end user and device connectivity in enterprise land campuses and branches. And so consequently, what we did is we looked at just all those functions that you needed to make that work, and we integrated them all together. We wrote the software, we got rid of the appliances, we wrote the software runs on standard, at this time, Intel servers or IA, Intel architecture computers. And we use high performance, switches and access points. And the big difference is we've now integrated all those functions so that the final experience doesn't require any new work by the customer, right? If you think about it, 40 years ago when you bought a car, you went out and bought a manual on how to fix the car. And today, certainly in the 2020s, and probably actually for the last 15 years, nobody fixes his or her own car, right? There's not much left for you to do. It's all handled by a mechanic or by the dealer or somebody like that. And our vision and what we've done with Join is really made that network, both the deployment experience and the consumption experience, just like what Salesforce and later Amazon did. And so those are really and then of course our embrace of data to simplify the use and improve the experience were essential to how we implemented our network and how we will continue to improve over time.